Welcome back, everybody, to Talk of the Now podcast. I'm your host, Gene, and I've got Jason again here with us today, most often as usual. Jason, how are you today, sir?
Well, Gene, I'm rolling. No,
Aha,
no, I'm good. I'm great.
indeed. Well, Jason we've got a little bit of catching up to do. Jason, um, for
Yeah,
those that
little
don't know,
life events, you
may
know.
or may not have gotten, excuse me, hitched lately. As he should, I've actually lost my ring.
Oh
Quit
no.
laughing. Um, I've got to find the stupid thing. Anyway, I was going to have well, for those that keep up with the podcast, we're going to go over some of that in a depending on how I arrange this, it'll be either a future or newer episode. You have to see.
Right.
Depends on how I arrange it. Today, though, we're going to talk about Star Wars. We're going to round out our Star Wars discussion with part 3 and go from there. So let's just dig right into it and get on with it. And we're going to try to round this out within about 30 minutes or so,
Yeah.
just to sort of give our final thoughts. We covered, I had to do some splicing and everything for the last one. And
Right.
I believe we covered Return of the Jedi in our last video,
True.
for the most part. So we covered New Hope, Return of the Jedi, and I'm sorry, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. We've covered a lot of the bases. Years released, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, 77, 80, and 83.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And Jason and I are old enough. Jason attended two of them, or all three at the movie theater, right?
All three.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I only did one. I did Return of the Jedi. My parents weren't into taking me to that sort of stuff when I was um
You know, a
born.
toddler like they did with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By 83 though, I was a full-fledged kiddo, and
Yeah.
I went to Green's Corner over in Lilburn to watch Return of the Jedi in 1983. Went with some, I believe, cousins and maybe a friend or two. Can't remember the exact cousins that I went to. Green's Corner, for those of you that don't know, there's a road in Atlanta named after the former president Jimmy Carter, and it's a shopping center. I don't think it's a Walmart shopping center now. I don't even know if the Walmart was there back then. Was it not?
No,
I
it
don't
was not.
know.
No.
Okay. But it was a cool looking little 2-story kind of building that had miscellaneous. It was cool for back in this day. It had like a
Yep.
baseball card shop
It had
that
a
I used to go
military
to.
surplus store. Yeah.
Oh, did it really? I don't even remember that.
Yeah. I
Okay.
bought a Chinese throwing star from there one time.
Ah.
Yeah.
Um, so when anyways, I grew up and went to that movie theater a lot of times in the 80s because there weren't a lot of them around yet in the greater Gwinnett County area. Um, Later on, there was one that opened up in the Stone Mountain area called hey, well, went through all kind of iterations of names, but I remember seeing mainly that one. One of my earliest memories of going to a theater, and a couple years later seeing Back to the Future like 6 times in one summer.
And the crazy thing is, folks, I saw Back to the Future at that same exact theater.
Probably saw the same show and didn't even realize we were there together.
Yeah, in 1985. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
The night before we went to Disney World for the first time, we went and saw on opening weekend Back to the Future. Yeah.
Wow. We'll have to do it. Maybe we'll do a Back to the Future
Oh
episode.
yeah, that'd be good. Like a whole Robert Zemeckis thing. Yeah.
I was just thinking, what if Robert Zemeckis had directed one of the Star Wars movies? That could be kind of interesting with his style.
Yeah, it probably would have been entertaining too.
Yeah, yeah. Um, anyway, back to Star Wars. I remember, of course, loving it as a kid and watching it. Just kind of remember going to theater and don't really remember a lot of the details other than just loving it. And I do remember we touched on this last time that later on, 1985, 87, 89, kind of stuck in my head like, wonder if he'd ever do another one of these movies. I don't know.
Yep.
And of course, as far as we know, he never did. He did. I'm sorry, he never did up till he never made any sort of like,
Star Wars movie.
yeah, like he never made another one. What do you call those? Sequels to that excuse me, trilogy. So
Right.
the The funny thing is, and we talked about this last time as well, outside of like movies, kind of like the Bond movies, they didn't really do trilogy type movies back then, did they?
Well, I mean, you had Indiana Jones, you had
Hmm.
Back to the Future, obviously. And then
Well,
that
I'm
came a
talking
little
like
late.
early '80s and back. You know. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, I don't.
unless you
Indiana
talk
Jones wasn't. That one wasn't even
no,
meant to be one, was it?
no. And I think, when you look at trilogies, it was more your silly movies or your, you know,
Hmm.
your,
Apple Dumpling
your
Gang.
yeah, or your borderline raunchy movies like Porky's and things
Oh
like that.
gosh.
You
Uh
know,
huh. Revenge
um,
of the Nerds.
right? Movies like that, they did those, but the trilogy wasn't really like a staple of movie
Epic
making. No,
trilogy.
yeah,
Like they didn't do second part of Citizen Kane or
no,
Doctor
no,
Zhivago
no.
or
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
Raiders of
there's
the. I mean, what do you call it? One of my top five movies probably. Oh, what am I thinking of? The one from the '60s with Anthony, or not Anthony, but Peter O'Toole, Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia. Wow, yeah. Um, no, you're right. They didn't do that much, and so Lucas kind of brought that into the forefront with Star Wars and with Indiana Jones. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, Lucas didn't really have anything planned after that first movie. Wasn't really planning on it being as a big success as it was either. Which I think we've touched on.
Yeah. Which neither
But it
did sorry, Lucas. He didn't plan on Star Wars being a trilogy,
that's
did
what I
he?
said. Yeah,
Oh,
Lucas
I'm sorry.
didn't. Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
thinking
Lucas.
as you're saying it.
Well, and then Lucas and Spielberg was a natural team up for Indiana Jones.
Absolutely.
That whole series, which originally was just Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, and Indiana Jones was the character in that movie. Um, so much like Star Wars was, they came up with names later on.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars was not a New Hope when it first came out; it was just Star Wars. Um,
You're right.
and the blindingly crazy success of that movie, it spawned a whole new industry. I think of well, it spawned merchandising, which we know about because we all participated in that when we were kids. And it spawned just this whole idea, like you said, the epic trilogy, which the epic is, obviously as old as writing,
Yeah.
but Lucas drew from a lot of that, which is why it was so successful. He drew on character development
You know
and
what?
that, and
Go ahead.
no, and it just kind of that's what spawned. Oh, we want more of these. We want
Mm-hmm.
more of these stories. That's kind of what you know uh, gets it gets people back to the theater. If they know they've got another one coming, it's like, ooh, yeah,
Speaking of merchandising,
yeah.
I think I might have something. I think I might have. I didn't. This spontaneous people. I think I might have a an artifact of that era. Jason, talk among yourself. I'll be right back. Let me go. I'm going to go off video. Jason's going to talk to you about whatever he feels like. And I'll be right back.
Okay, everybody. So now it's my podcast. So yeah. And speaking of merchandising, my friend Mark Head from Alabama, who is one of the biggest Star Wars collectors I know, was a groomsman in my wedding, and actually talked to the preacher about his Star Wars obsession because the pastor that did our wedding is actually a big Star Wars fan. So that was a really cool, and everybody got to hear about Mark's collection, and I showed him pictures, and so yeah. And I will show you something when Gene gets back as well that I have in this room. I'm obviously moved in to an office space in my new townhome with my wife, and am setting up my office. So there's going to be some tributes in there um, as well. But anyway, it's great to be able to talk to you all again. I actually went to Iceland on my honeymoon. We're going to get into that more, but man, amazing country. Um, yeah, so just trying to get settled here at the house, and there we go. And I don't know where Gene went, but we're just going to sit here and talk. And this is going to be funny on the podcast. He might actually edit me out, but anyway, yeah. So there's a lot of cool things we can talk about with Star Wars. It's just mainly for me, it's the connection to my childhood. in that whole epic story, you know, that we all want. So in our lives, we all strive for that adventure in our lives. Bless you. Uh, and anyway, so that's it. And I don't know where Gene went. He's taking his time, folks. Pardon the camera here for a second, but I'm about to show you guys something. So 1 second. I'm gonna get right in front of the camera. Sorry, this is my high quality shirt that I'm wearing. And I will have something prepared for Gene when he comes back to show him. And to show everybody, actually. My friend Mark got me a gift a long time ago that's a really cool limited edition collectible. And yeah, so
I am back. Hold
Gene
on
is
one
back.
second. Jason,
And,
how was your conversation with yourself?
oh, you know, it was grand. Sometimes the best conversations I have are with myself. So there we go. Gene has an artifact. He's going to show us, folks. Get ready, folks. Prepare yourselves for the amazing artifact that Gene has that we're still waiting on with bated breath. Gene. And here he comes, folks. He's going to make a gallant and grand appearance of, oh, look at that.
Hello, I am your father.
Oh, nice. The classic. Ooh, I look just like Darth Vader two-piece mask. Yes.
This
Yes.
is a Darth Vader mask that I got for Christmas. And I'm not even sure what year that was.
Yep.
This was back in the 80s. Still got the box.
Oh,
Sorry
that's
for
good.
those of you that are on the audio side. I will be posting the video of this. Here's the box.
Wow, you still got the box. So even if
Yeah,
you just
still got the
have the box, it makes it worth more. It's kind of fun.
Oh wow, yeah.
So my not
There's
old
a spider in the box. I think he's
oh,
I think
Gene's about to turn into some kind of crazy creature because he's about to get bit by a spider.
There was a spider on the box. I think he's dead. Hopefully he's not in my head. Sorry.
So mine is the same character, and Gene's seen this before. My friend Mark, like I was telling everybody, while you know Gene was ignoring all of us, is a huge Star Wars collector, and the man has a separate building on his property. He was actually one of my groomsmen at my wedding. For his collection, his parents were smart enough back in the day to buy two of everything. So Mark had found a collectible and got me this, which is a CinemaCast Darth Vader by Kenner. And it's actually cast in it's polymer and in ceramic, and it's a limited edition. And so I keep this and obviously treasure it, you know, as a gift from my good friend Mark, and pretty durable. It's only like 5 pieces, you know, and I store it in its original box, but I keep it out here, and I'm going to put it as part of my new office decor. Which will be a race car movie themed, and maybe some music thrown in there. Yeah, so we talk about just the giant of a merchandising machine that was Star Wars, and Lucas was smart. He got the rights to the merchandising right away. And
the other only thing, I had some when I was little, I had a bunch of or at least maybe like 5, 10, 15 Star Wars action figures. Sure you did too.
Oh, yeah.
They've all been lost except for poor Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't know where he is right now, but he's somewhere around here.
And does he still have his cape and his little in his arms lightsaber?
I think he's got the cape, but not the lightsaber, or maybe the lightsaber, not the cape, one or the other. But that's the only artifact that I have. For some reason, when my parents moved back in the mid-90s, they all used to live in the attic in a box, and the box had somehow mysteriously lost. Of course, that was able to keep all the Matchbox and Hot Wheels cars that I had, but somehow or another, my favorites that I had were my G.I. Joe action figures and my Star Wars figures, and they're all gone.
And I think everybody knows, you know, G.I. Joe is actually more rare because, you know, they were played with hard, and those figures had all the posable arms, and they were just, they broke and they were gone. So if you can find G.I. Joe stuff, it's actually worth more loose than Star Wars are.
Here's the other
original.
Here's the other thing I have.
Unchanged theater edition.
I don't know if the camera can see that well, but I got this fairly recent. I bought this last year, no, earlier this year at an estate sale for $1.
Yeah, pretty cool to have, man. Just
Just
the
for a
artwork
dollar,
alone.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, Gene's an artist here, guys, and he doesn't like to talk about that a lot, but he can appreciate the graphic design on that too.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
that's what you buy that for. You know, you're probably not gonna pop into a VCR,
I may try to
and
sometime.
and unfortunately, because VHS is magnetic, just like audio tapes, it does wear out
Yeah.
over time. So yeah, you can try. It's just
Well, for a dollar,
you're
it
gonna
was
get
worth it.
VHS quality. Oh,
For a
and
dollar,
for
it
a
was
dollar,
worth
dude,
it. And I might
for a
actually
dollar
sell
to
these. I
for a
may,
dollar
what, you go ahead.
to display it is worth it, you know, for a
Yeah.
dollar.
I mean, there might be I have a few devices where I can, transfer that to video. And so we'll see if I do that, but maybe not. Don't worry, copywriters. We'll see. Anyway, I
There's no confirming or denying anything that Gene just said. There we
right.
go. Um,
Um, but anyway, I may sell it to somebody that might appreciate it and try to like put it in a case or something like that. I just bought it because it was a
right,
good deal
yeah.
and it's worth more than
For a
a
buck,
dollar.
yeah, you can't argue. Yeah, definitely worth more than a dollar.
So yeah,
Man,
that's what I have left for mine. You know what? I did buy some of the a few years ago, back in maybe the mid early 2000s, 2005 ish. They did a bunch of reissues of old Star Wars stuff, and I bought a
yeah.
Millennium Falcon
Oh,
for
yeah,
like
that's a good one.
$40,
Yeah.
and I bought a few other action figures that I just bought for fun because they were only like $5 a piece, and I was kind of sad that I lost all my old ones. My kids have ransacked my Millennium Falcon, and it's in their bedroom under their bed because they saw it and fell in love with it, even though they had no idea what it was. So
Well, let's say, you know what? Just goes to show
yeah.
Star Wars has an effect. There you go.
Do you have any of your old stuff, toys left?
Sadly, no, I do
Oh,
not. I might have an errant figure or something. Actually, I do. I have like a whole case of figures, actually, or a whole like container of loose figures. But that's the
okay.
only stuff I have original from anything I had.
Hmm.
I even have an old VHS copies of it from the 80s that are done in the original like movie poster style
Ah,
on the outside somewhere in a box right now in a box somewhere. I have no idea. Um, but no, I don't. I sadly don't have anything. And like I said, my friend Mark, he still has like 30 or 40 of them that are doubles from when his parents bought them in the 70s. So
hmm.
still in the package, still
Now,
with the Kmart stickers on them, you know?
I am not holding Jason to this, but I've given Jason an assignment if he gets around to it. I
Yeah.
don't know if he talked to it about Mark, but I suggested that maybe they do sort of an undercover sort of. Mark doesn't have to show his face, but maybe go do a little video when he goes back to
Oh, hello.
Alabama
Yeah.
and just
Yeah.
do like a little
Location. Yeah.
tour of the thing, and maybe we'll post that on YouTube or something at some point.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we're not going to give away his location or any of that mess or even really his name. But I mean, the collection alone would show well. And maybe it'll be when I go down there. I'm supposed to go down there eventually sometime to help him reorganize it. So maybe we can reorganize it and get it set up nice. And then I can
Hmm.
do a little video short
Yeah,
about it. Um,
that could be cool.
because and he's one of those guys too that knows everything about Star Wars. Like I'm a fan, but he knows like the escape pod number on the things, and I mean he
Oh
knows
wow.
everything. So he's like a huge star. Like if you would do Star Wars trivia, you want him on your team. Um, but
Hmm.
he also is like that about music. I mean, he's a huge Kiss fan. He's a huge Alice Cooper fan. He's a huge Prince fan. I mean, so he's a passionate guy like me, which is kind of why we clicked as friends because we're both passionate people. Um, but and I met him because I stood in line at the theater he worked at for 2.5 days for episode one. So Star Wars will always be our link. Um,
Hmm.
and I said something akin to that at my rehearsal dinner, actually, which was at Road Atlanta, Michelin Raceway Road Atlanta, in the suite of Michelin Tower. I said something to the akin of like, if it weren't for Star Wars, I literally would not know Mark. So,
You have Star Wars today.
movies have that. Yeah, movies have that power over us, though. Like, how many times, Gene, do you remember? Aside from music, I mean, music I think is more linked to our lives, but how many times do you say, "Oh man, I remember that movie was out this time of my life, and I remember that time of my life by whatever summer you went and watched that movie."
Hmm.
And I think that's what Star Wars kind of even links more deeply to in us is that whole, gosh, I miss my childhood. Even the new ones make me go, oh man, I miss being a kid. When you had that nothing on your plate in your life, but to have an imagination and to go on your crazy adventures in your neighborhood, to build forts and to get dirty and to come home when the streetlights come on. I think that's all what, whether he intended it or not, Lucas kind of touched that nerve in our hearts with these movies, and to enough to where we're still talking about it.
Absolutely. And I've gotten, just from looking at the analytics, I've seen from our first 2 Star Wars episodes that we did that they are pretty popular among the other episodes.
I mean, yeah, because people see it and they know, oh man, Star Wars, like, all right.
Not that we're trying to hook you in, even though we are.
That's right. Yeah, we are. Yeah.
Like, share, subscribe. Anyway,
hit the subscribe button right down.
Well, what I like about Star Wars, I think, is something that I don't get it out of many movies nowadays. A matter of fact, I've been going back. An assignment that my wife and I have been doing is going. I've mentioned it, I think, before. Is going back to watch all the live animation movies that Walt Disney did from the time of, I don't know when his first live action movie was. I can't remember which one it was, all the way up to whenever. And we're still in the mid 60s now. And we've been doing this for over half a year.
Shows you how much he made back then. Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of these movies do what Star Wars did for me as a kid. And like you said, whenever I watch it, I grew up on MTV. I may have watched it more than you did as a kid. I don't know. But a lot of times I can watch it. I can watch an old MTV video music, and it transforms me back to when I was 7 years old. An example would be Eurythmics, Sweet Dreams.
Sweet Dreams.
I can still think of that video going to my cousin's house as a little boy, and it would be on because they always played MTV, and I could just, see her in the field next to the other guy. I forget his name. Playing his synthesizer thing, in the field, and I just still picture Annie Lennox playing, singing that. And I mean, Tina Turner, her videos, I can still picture those things as a kid. And same thing with Star Wars. But what I was going to say is that whenever a movie can drag me in to make me almost feel like I'm watching a book, if that makes sense. Like when you read a good book and you sort of get into the book, and there could be a nuclear bomb and you would have no idea because you're so into the book. That's how I like a movie to be. It's so good that you don't really care about everything else that's going on in life. You're just concentrating on that movie at that time. And to me, that's what Star Wars does.
Yeah, you escape.
For a simpler way of putting it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I watch movies, period, is to escape and to be entertained by escaping, I mean, I like stuff that's close to real life sometimes too, but for the most part, nah, I want something different. And you can't get much more different than a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, right?
No, absolutely.
And I think Joss Whedon tickled that again with like the series Firefly. I mean, that was as close to that kind of feeling as I got in a long time. And as a kind of a space Western basically is what that was. And it's along the same lines of what Lucas drew from, which was the old Westerns, the old Japanese films, the old, stuff like that. And that's it. It sucks you into a story, and it longs for you, like, oh gosh, can't there be just one more? Like, I want to know what happens next,
Right.
And that was all of us after Return of the Jedi, because most of us, we were old enough by then to kind of really escape into that movie. And I mean, we're at 7 or 8 years old, that kind of thing. I mean, I was 7, so were you, actually. Yeah. Probably. Or you were 6. Were you? Anyway. So, you're old enough by then to kind of escape into a movie as a child. And I think it kind of made you go, gosh, why can't there be another one? And we were saying that for 16 years after that. And that's not lost on me, that it took 16 years for another one to come out.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why I stood in line that's why I stood in line 2.5 days for it, because I'm like, I've been waiting since I was 7 for a
Sometimes
new
I
Star
wonder
Wars movie.
if Lucas had realized what all the '80s kids, were just anticipating in the late '80s. If he'd been like, maybe I'll go ahead and do this. I don't know. Uh,
Well, I mean, I think he's aware of that, but I mean, Lucas did what he wanted to do.
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And and he had other projects. I mean, his other companies like Skywalker Sound and Industrial Light and Magic were already like deep involved in other projects for other companies. I mean, he had the Indiana Jones stuff. I mean, he made Willow,
Hmm.
a bunch of other movies after that, and it's like, I mean, who can forget the cinematic genius that was Howard the Duck? I
Yeah.
mean,
Great sci-fi.
like, yeah, exactly. Um, so there's so many aspects to why Star Wars still lives in our hearts, and you can't say that for many movies. And not and other than music, which lives in, I know at least Gene and I's heart, pretty heavily. You go through moods with music, right? And you go through moods with movies and what you like. But there are certain ones that stand the test of time. And Star Wars, for lack of a better comparison, I'm gonna just go out on a limb here and say this. Star Wars is to movies, to me, what Led Zeppelin is to rock and roll, if
Interesting.
that makes sense. Because it's got staying power. People 50 years from now are still going to watch episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Star Wars and are still going to be amazed by the technology that was utilized at that time.
Hmm.
So, we can talk about all these great movies that come out before and after it, and there are some that have the same staying power, but very rarely does a series of movies have that much staying power. I mean, you got your Godfather, Godfather 2,
Right.
Godfather 3, for good Lord. But you just don't get that I mean, like the Back to the Future is the same way, but luckily with Back to the Future, Zemeckis was genius enough to write in time travel, so they will never be dated. Those movies will never be dated, because it's like, who knows? It's supposed to look like that. It's in the past, it's in the future, it's everywhere.
But
But
that
Star
brings me
Wars
to
is
a
that.
couple of questions then.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time, but let me go through a couple of questions here. Short answers. Do you have a favorite one or two characters in the whole trilogy?
I mean, it's easy. I mean, because there wasn't a lot of lead characters. Um,
Hmm.
it's easy to say Han Solo, as a guy. I think Han Solo kind of embodies that Wild West feeling, of Star Wars. So I would probably say either Han Solo or actually Lando Calrissian,
Okay.
um, because I like him as a side character. I think he obviously the movie Solo kind of showed how they met and how that all came about. But yeah, I would. I mean, it's tough to say because there's not really a whole lot of
Hmm.
character depth other than about 8 or 9 characters. So yeah, I mean, I would say Han Solo, probably easy answer.
Okay. Yeah.
He's what all of us guys want in like a swashbuckling kind of space pirate, space cowboy kind of feel.
Well, it's funny. I agree with that answer, by the way. If he had been written more into the story, I think that Obi-Wan would have been my favorite.
Yeah,
Because
I
as far
agree.
as the first movie goes, he's probably my favorite character in that movie.
Oh,
Um,
easily. Yeah.
but as the movie goes toward the end, you become more, favored toward Han Solo, and then, second and third movie, oh yeah, Han Solo's the man. I wish I was Han Solo kind of guy,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, but Obi-Wan, I mean, I think a lot of it's just Alec Guinness is just, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
he's just such a
He's
great
other.
actor and did such a good
He's
job.
on a whole other level. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the weird thing is, though Han Solo is my favorite character, Luke is kind of the person that I'm rooting for the whole time. You want him to do
Right. Yeah. Of
good and you
course.
want him to get
Well,
to
and
the other side.
I'm going to venture out to say Luke is more like us. Luke
Mhm.
is the kind of innocent who's thrust into a bigger picture, doesn't really understand, has to kind of deal with it as it comes. That's kind of like life.
Right.
So Luke to me is more like our experience through life, whereas Han Solo is the
Hmm.
guy that the cool guy that you find at a, you
Hmm.
know, the local tavern who's going to show you his motorcycle, you know, and teach you how to like,
And
you know,
you know,
shoot a gun or something, you know.
something I would argue about Princess Leia too is that she is sort of a character that sneaks up on you, and you don't
Yep.
really, you know, expect it. She becomes a strong character, but she doesn't overpower the scene, if you will. She
Right.
just makes a great supporting actress, for lack of a better word, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. She is more of she's a lead actress, but she's supporting by that in that lead role.
Kind of like
Um,
Chewbacca. He sort of sneaks up on you, and before you know it, he's one of your favorite people in the movie.
even though you can't understand a word he's saying, which is
Exactly. Yeah.
crazy. That's the power. That's the power of Lucas. You know, he can do that. I mean,
Hmm.
and Industrial Light and Magic and Skywalker Sound have done that in other movies, like the movie Wally.
Yeah.
I mean, hardly anything said in that movie, and you still are understanding him and rooting for him, and you know, like,
Okay, so
um,
let me
yeah.
ask this then. If you were to go back, we know we've already talked about this, but if George Lucas called you up 1987, Jason, I'm just going to do a side project. It's going to be a one-off, background or side story for one of these characters or some story in Star Wars. Which one do you think you would have told him to do?
Hmm.
I'll hang up and listen for your answer. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh. um, I mean, honestly, I think Chewie's story would have been a good one
Hmm.
because Chewie's kind of out there. We don't even really know, honestly, in the original ones, we are never told where he's from, any of that stuff. That was all done in like secondary novels and stuff written by other people.
Although, was
Um,
he not going? Return of the Jedi, the Ewoks were going to originally be Wookiees, weren't they?
yeah, that's
Maybe
true.
that clues us in on what it would have possibly been like.
Yeah, and he tried to make, you know, in the prequels, he tried to make Kashyyyk
Mm,
look kind of like Endor, but not really, you know, because he kind of knew everybody knew that switch that happened, so you couldn't make it look exactly like people living in the giant redwoods. Um, so it was forested enough, but it was still a kind of agrarian. But I think Chewie's side story would be good along with Yoda's.
hmm.
Um, those two to me would kind of link a lot of things and would kind of help, I think, and especially like if you're talking 1987, you know, 10 years after the first movie and 4 years after the last one that was made at that point,
Right.
you know, people are looking for, I mean, we had the Ewok movies, the two Ewok movies that came out as like little TV movies, which were good.
Right.
Battle for Endor and then the Ewok Adventure, I believe is the other one. Um, so that kind of gave us some side, not really a side story. There wasn't anybody on there that we recognize, but you know what I mean. It kind of gave us a little bit more
Yeah.
um, material about Ewoks. But I think the Wookiee aspect would have been an interesting thing. You know, turn out to where they didn't just it wasn't
Yeah.
just a Sasquatch type thing because that's really what it appeared to look like.
I can
Was
tell
more
you
of a
what mine would have been.
Sasquatch.
Mine
What's
would have
that?
been a Boba Fett movie. The
And we saw.
1987 Boba Fett. It would have just been a simple backstory, maybe even kind of like cross section it into Return of the Jedi, show some of those scenes kind of or different views
Yeah,
of those
yeah,
scenes, and then showed him what happened after that when he fell into it. Maybe he escapes and moves on. I mean, I know that's they kind of did that in the TV show, but I think it would have been really cool to have done back then. Maybe even show him doing some of his bounty hunting stuff back in his prime type stuff, you know. So I
yeah.
don't know.
Concentrate more on him as a bounty hunter. Yeah, I mean, you could
So
really just go in that aspect. Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah.
so anyways, to conclude this, that was all I mainly had to say. And I think that man, you could deep dive about Star Wars for about 20
We could
episodes.
we could just do a whole podcast, you know, dedicated to it if we wanted to, and still not talk about all of it. Yeah.
Right. I think we didn't really go into any of the later movies that happened. We kind of touched on the
Yeah.
prequels a little bit. I think you like them. They're okay to me, the prequels.
Yeah. I mean, they are what they are. I don't
if you
think I'm kind of indifferent, really, in some respects. I mean, I like they came out. I like that it was, attempted to show the story and how it worked out. I think
Mhm.
obviously some of it was a little trying too hard. If you want to know my true feelings on it, but it was still Lucas and it was still good, but it was just you can't put them in the same category with the originals that we remember.
Right. Though
Different
Obi-Wan,
time frame.
I think Obi-Wan did a great, you know what I mean? His character was great in those movies.
Oh yeah, definitely him and Qui-Gon.
Yeah, they were the
Qui-Gon in the
most.
first one.
They were kind of the most. Those were the best parts of those movies. Watching Obi-Wan Kenobi's backstory
Yeah.
a little bit. Other, I was trying to think if there's any other characters that might be worth. If somebody wanted to go back and watch those, you know, excuse me, I guess intriguing characters to watch from those prequels. But I think that I'm sorry, I'm losing the actor's name. Uh,
Who?
Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was great as Obi-Wan Kenobi in those movies. I
Oh
thought.
yeah, he was perfect. He was a perfect for that role. If I've ever seen if somebody being cast for a younger version of somebody,
Hmm.
he did a pretty good job being a younger version of basically Alec Guinness. Not easy shoes to fill by any means.
Hmm.
Actor, and just stage acting wise. But Ewan McGregor also is an accomplished actor, and could handle it, I think, and did handle it
Right.
well.
Yeah, and just I mean, maybe they're trying to draw parallels, but just as with Alec McGinnis, when you had
Alec Guinness, not McGinnis. Yeah,
why did I say McGinnis? Anyway, with his
because you said McGregor and McGinnis.
yeah,
Yes.
with Qui-Gon Jinn, I wish that he had been more bigger part of that story, but he just
Yeah.
like Obi-Wan, he was just taken out in the first movie.
Well, he was a vehicle to get you to a next point as a
Right.
character, and I think that had to be that way.
Hmm. So the I mean, the new ones, honestly, if they're not, they're just kind of their own thing. If you want to check them
Yeah,
out,
they are.
but
Yeah, they are. The new ones are
I,
definitely their own thing. I
I
think they
think
were
they're
good movies, but they were just. I think the offshoot movies to me are better. The Solo and Rogue One
mhm,
were both to me better as movies all around. To have happened one before and one in between other movies, I think was a brilliant way to do that, because then they could rely on their own with enough of an homage to the old ones to get people like us out there and keep us interested.
mhm.
I think Solo was the best of those two, but
Really.
yeah.
I'm opposite. I thought that Rogue One was a little better than the two, but neither one were like huge on my
Yeah.
list. But again, I just take them as just totally different things. And I'm not really a big fan of the newer ones at all, really. But that's a whole
Well,
different story.
and I watched them and I was entertained. I was entertained.
Hmm.
But I had to treat them as separate movies. I couldn't treat them as, stuff that linked at all really to the old ones. So
Mm. Well, anyways, we'll close that out. But as far as the old ones go, as you can tell, Jason and I are big fans, and we recommend you watch them. And
just a little bit. Yeah.
I think that you will get a lot of value out of it, as the kids say these days, right?
Yeah,
So,
if you're one of the few unfortunate people that have lived under a rock and haven't watched them, um, then yeah, I agree.
well, it'll be interesting to see what my kids think when they get to be a little bit older, and I let them watch it.
Oh yeah, that's all. That would be always cool to be able to introduce your own kids to something that you loved so
Yeah.
deeply. I mean, it's always great.
So, anyway, all right. Well, we'll call it a day. Call it a wrap on that one, Jason, and we'll talk to everybody later. Adios, Jason. Thank you, sir.
You as well, sir.
Have a great day, everybody, and we will talk to you later.